Thank you, Dr. Kursel, for that incredible keynote. And thank you to our audience for jumping right in with questions. Let's keep the discussions going for the next day and a half. So my name is Ainsley Cameron. I'm the curator of South Asian art, Islamic art, and antiquities here at the museum. And it's an absolute honor to welcome you all back into the museum and to this program. So thank you for joining us. This symposium will explore the ways in which the 21st Century Museum can better serve the collection it stewards and the community that it serves. For this project, these communities include many of the academic, religious, and civic institutions of Cincinnati. The gallery would not be what it is today without the robust and exciting exchange of ideas that has occurred over the last few years between representatives from the University of Cincinnati, Hebrew Union College, and the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati. To honor and uphold these relationships, we'd like to continue that conversation here this evening through our roundtable discussion. The goal of this discussion is to explore the ways in which Cincinnati institutions can work together most effectively to leverage the arts in our city. As advocates of these vital Cincinnati institutions, our participants will share thoughts and opinions as to how the museum can continue to be a hub for the communities that we serve. How can the collaboration between the Islamic Center, Hebrew Union College, UC, and CAM that proved so vital in the shaping of this project continue to flourish and grow over the coming months and years? And how can the museum continue to fulfill its goal of contributing to a more vibrant Cincinnati by inspiring its people and connecting our communities? I'd like to welcome to the stage Cameron Kitchin, Shakila Ahmad, Valerio Ferme, and Jonathan Hecht to the stage. As they get settled, I'll give you a brief background of their momentous achievements. So yes, you can clap now. So that background, these bios are awesome. Cameron, who we've already met, is, of course, the director here at the Art Museum. Kitchin is dedicated to the Art Museum's service to the public and advancing the role of art and education in Cincinnati's civic agenda. Since its appointment in 2014, Kitchin has led the museum to embrace its founding principles of inspiring people and connecting communities through the power of art. He previously served as director of the Memphis Brooks Museum of Art and as executive director of the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art. He's also led political campaigns for the federal cultural agencies for the American Alliance of Museums. Seated next to him, Shakila Ahmad is a community leader and the first woman to serve as board chair and president of the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati. Ahmad's outreach seeks to strengthen interfaith relations. Along with other initiatives, she established the ICGC's Tours and Talk program to educate members of the Cincinnati community about Islam and Muslim culture, reaching over 100,000 individuals since its conception. Among other recognitions, she was awarded the FBI Community Leadership Award by then FBI Director Robert Mueller in 2011 and holds an honorary doctorate from Mount St. Joseph University, awarded in 2019. Next, Rabbi Hecht serves as Dean and Interim Rabbinical Program Director at Hebrew Union College. He received his PhD from New York University in Jewish history. Rabbi Hecht previously served as rabbi at a temple on Long Island from 1992 to 2018. During these 26 years, he created a vibrant and inclusive community that welcomed diverse gender expression and interfaith families. He also served as a chaplain for the New York Air National Guard, for which he received the Air Force Achievement Medal for his dedicated service that included the creation of the Suicide Prevention and Holocaust Remembrance programs. Finally, we have Valerio Ferme, Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at the University of Cincinnati. As the Cincinnati's Chief Academic Officer, Ferme oversees the human and fiscal resources that fuel UC's academic and research mission while also supporting faculty and student success. Prior to this role, he oversaw the College of Arts and Sciences, where he focused on stabilizing its budget while revitalizing its extensive areas of excellence in different disciplines. A humanist by training with a PhD in comparative literature, Ferme has published extensively on topics ranging from Mediterranean studies to medieval literature and interarts Forms of Resistance under Italian Fascism. Welcome all to the stage and to this discussion, and I'll now pass it over to Cameron, who will be moderating.
Well, thank you to each of you, and thank you, Ainsley, for that kind introduction. It's again my pleasure to be with each and every one of you in this room, and most of all to be with each of our distinguished panelists, to be together in this time, each representing institutions that are collections of people and individuals and personalities, but also express voices of authority in some case, is an interesting moment in time, in which we'll return to that in just a moment, in which that can be used towards betterment of our community and has over time, and also that it's a fraught moment at this point in history. But I'd like to begin, if you don't mind, Shakila, and they've known each other some time. Shakila, I think I first had a chance to visit the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati when I came to visit as part of a Leadership Cincinnati class. And I think we met at that time and then had a chance to cross paths many times ever since. And I admire you and your family so greatly. I'd like to begin by saying that so much of your work at the Islamic Center, and we'll begin by getting to know each other's institutions, is built on community engagement. That is a faith-driven organization, but it is really built on the idea that faith leads us to community engagement and leads us to know one another better. That means reaching outside of the Islamic Center's immediate community. So can you talk to us about examples or lessons where in a moment where listening is a key word, that what that listening has led you to from the Islamic Center and in your own life?
Absolutely, and it's an honor to be here, and it's always wonderful to see you and the great work that you and the team are doing here. As I look at the outreach and engagement, I mean, yes, it's a faith-based organizations made up of unique and individual families that are all very diverse, and collectively we're part of the community as a whole. And so in reaching out to the external community, I think it begins with learning about the other. It begins with acknowledging that, none of our communities are monoliths. And it's really important that, we hear what it is that they want to be known about them, what it is that they feel are their needs in order for you to be able to properly and effectively and holistically engage with them. And so, I say, let them come in the way that they want to come, to be who they are. I always say there's no bad question. There's always an opportunity to grow and learn, and that, the more different we are, the more it is we have an opportunity to listen and to learn and to grow. And so I think, it's enriched myself and my work far more than what it is that I'm thinking I'm doing for others.
I think that's beautifully said, and I could take many of those words and reiterate what we hope one might say about an art museum. Right, in many cases. I would also say that we've had a chance to break bread together, both in your home and at the Islamic Center, and that I always admire that sense of sort of unification rather than division. Right, the celebration of the shared that I sort of said comes through all of your work, and so thank you for that generosity. Speaking of, I'd like to turn to Rabbi Hecht for just a moment. Speak a little bit about your work and your long and storied history in Cincinnati and prior for creating spaces for individuals who might otherwise feel today, we use the term othered, who might otherwise feel marginalized and left on the edges of society and not heard. So take that sort of conversation forward for us. And what are the challenges that you find, and also what joy in that success, in those successes, have you found in trying to bring a sense of shared value within our community?
Thank you. Oh, it's working. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to participate, and it's great to be here with such esteemed and wonderful colleagues that I've gotten to know since I've come to Cincinnati 4 years ago. So a lot of the work that you're talking about that I engaged in and creating those kind of safe spaces for vulnerable populations really took place in my work for 25 years in the Congregational Rabbinate. And one of the principles that we have as an institution, we had it in our synagogue, was to try to create that kind of environment where people could feel safe and secure and express who they are and come together in community in many of the ways that you were talking about as well. And those are the same kind of values that I brought with me to the seminary, which I actually am ordained from this seminary, our New York campus, which I've tried to apply, and I have worked very hard to apply since I've come here. Our seminary is one of the leaders in the world in bringing in marginalized communities, people of different kinds of backgrounds, male-identifying students, female-identifying students, and people who are non-binary. We are, for example, this year we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the ordination of Rabbi Sally Priesand, who is the first woman to be ordained by an institutional seminary, and that took place right here in Cincinnati. It's something we're very, very proud of. And actually, speaking of exhibiting what we do and bringing that message out to the world as an institution or as a museum, by the way, I'll put a little shameless plug in here that on May 19th, we're going to be opening up an exhibit called Holy Sparks, 24 women who were the first in some kind of a leadership role within the Jewish community. And that's at just 2 days before ordination when Sally Priesand will speak. So anybody who wants to come and hear from a person who opened doors for people of who needed those doors open for them, this is going to be a great opportunity. And by the way, Sally is going to have her portrait hung in the National Portrait Gallery next year. So it's a very exciting moment. But within that,
you remind me, or do you mind me just stepping to say, remind us where that exhibit is being held?
Yeah, the exhibit is going to be at Hebrew Union College.
Good.
It's going to be divided between our archives and our museum, the Skirball Museum. So the question really, I think, is I can say how wonderful that is. In 50 years, we have made tremendous progress, not just welcoming female-identifying rabbis, but also people now transitioning people and the new frontier is going to be actually Jews of color. And we are trying to also make our workforce, our faculty, and our student body more reflective of what society looks like. And by the way, there's still work to be done. We are, despite the advances, there's still a gender pay gap for women rabbis compared to male rabbis. So I think the issue here is that it's not a one and done kind of a thing. We are constantly working towards making our institutions the kinds of places that are welcoming to all to be reflective of society and to cherish the kinds of skills and the gifts that people bring. And when you have that kind of an attitude, it takes time, but you begin to open the world up to other people. And that's what we do.
Again, I'd like to borrow each and every one of those, right, and bring it into to our work within the museum. Now, thank you for sharing that, and I do have some follow-on thoughts for each of our panelists. But I do want to point out as I turn to Provost Ferme, and to say that as we look across this panel, there is something that is shared among at least three of us. And Sheila, I'm going to ask you to help. Shakila, I'm going to ask you to help me with this. Born in Italy, born in New York, born in Virginia. Born in Pakistan. We all have immigrated to Cincinnati, right? So we each have found a home in this place, and that home has this wonderful sort of connectivity, and we know that I can speak as one who is not hold a Cincinnati birth certificate, that I will never be able to claim that. It cannot be changed, yet I can tell you that Cincinnati is perhaps uniquely welcoming in providing opportunity and lifting up and giving opening. And maybe it's something to do with both our corporate and academic cultures that are here that allow those possibilities. And so thank you to the native-born Cincinnatians for making that possible. Provost Ferme, you're the chief academic officer at our great University of Cincinnati, and many students who work with you and the faculty who help to educate those students and to listen as well and to learn from them. Many are from our region, right? Continuing that thread forward, but not all, right? The University of Cincinnati is at 40,000 plus students. That university attracts students from all over the world, particularly the most esteemed academic departments such as classics. The undergraduate and the graduate programs pull from throughout the country and the world. And so talk to me for a minute about the strength and diversity, that type of diversity, what that brings forward. During your tenure in the university, you've had perhaps one of your prior engagement at the university put you more closely in touch, I know, but in the last 2 years, you've also been the chief COVID officer. So I know you've managed all of the remote learning and everything else happening at the university. And so our university has deep local roots, but it has tentacles that reach out through academia throughout the world. So talk to me about that balance and about how that strengthens our community.
So I really like the question because it kind of puts us into the perspective of what has happened at the university. The university was founded as a municipal entity in service of the city. It really was to provide opportunities for the local population of either college age, but also returning students to further their education and possibly, make gains in the world. One of the things that has happened in the last, let's call it 40, 50 years, and probably even prior to that, and in fact our friends at Classics probably would say much before that, has to do with the investment that many local, families have put in to the educational system that sort of the University of Cincinnati supports. And that has created this growth of our research, which has then, made us what in this country is called Research One University, which are the sort of high-level research universities. And that has drawn, obviously, people from all over the world into this environment. And so the mixing of, populations that come from outside with local population, I think is one of the ways in which we learn. It's when you bring people from different cultures together in these environments, you give them opportunities to broaden their view of what the world is and what it should be. And it allows for, I think, what Miss Ahmad was talking about, which is you open up yourself and you listen to different cultures. You give them the opportunity to see what other cultures have to offer. And I think our stewards of that are our faculty, are the people that have those kind of experiences and bring them back to this community. And then that intermeshing of communities really grows everybody. And I don't want to call it the intellectual capital, but the knowledge capital, the cultural capital that we all share.
Absolutely. Now I'll say again, each one of those I would like to borrow. And so I think that you have an early childhood education center, a vaunted, and I'm just past that phase. My youngest is in 5th grade, so I'm just past that phase. But it is just absolutely a sort of a paragon of internationalism, and what a wonderful community. It gives an example of how the university's own faculty is so wonderfully diverse and international as well. It brings the best of the world to Cincinnati. So let's talk a little bit more about, after the individual institutions, the sort of through lines and the collaboration among, and think about the Islamic Center and our own art museum. We have 3 wonderful art museums in Cincinnati, just on this side of the river. Right, just with our Contemporary Art Center and our Taft and our Cincinnati Art Museum, and think about the Islamic Center and the collaborations we've enjoyed together. And the Ancient Middle East Gallery is open, and the Islamic Gallery is near completion. Perhaps you can reference that, and think about other ways, other thoughts that have come to mind. Maybe we haven't even discussed prior, and now's the time. Right, on stage in front of an audience and a group of witnesses, to sort of ways in which the Islamic Center and your life there can intersect with the work of an art museum.
I think as a Muslim community, thank you. As the Muslim community has become more mature and settled, now, of the demographics, I'm a minority, because more and more of the people, Muslim Americans, have been born and raised in the U.S. And so I've got 2-3 of them in the audience, and I'm delighted because, we have to think about that. So yes, we have the opportunity through international artists and dignitaries. I mean, I still remember the profound impact that Queen Noor's visit had when we had the Petra exhibit and the unveiling, and she made a trip out to the Islamic Center, even though it hadn't opened yet, and so the dome was the sky, But I think we need to continue opportunities of such caliber and opportunities to have exhibits on loan and to be able to share and experience things together. At the same time, I think it's an opportunity for us to explore young artists, not necessarily always for the art per se, but for engagement in the conversations around the various types of opportunities of experiencing art that the Cincinnati Art Museum can offer. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity and potential for overlap in those conversations and for growth that can occur around the art and the exhibits themselves. And I've been here when you've commissioned and Anila Qayyum's Agha's All the Flowers Are For Me, and I would encourage the next time it's installed that people come and experience that. Shazia Sikandar, I was overwhelmed by the light and the color, and these are Pakistani American Muslim artists, but that bring a nuance view to and nuanced approaches to the art that we can experience together that allows also people to learn about culture and history and connections. And so I would say we explore those together. I would say that we leverage what you have here and what the Islamic Center has. People don't know. We have a mini Umayyad room, and Mr. Ahmad Samawi, God bless his soul, challenged us to have a Mughal Empire room and a Persian Empire. We haven't gotten there yet, but maybe together we can, is really what I'm thinking, is that there are tremendous opportunities because there's so much for us to explore and to share and to learn from.
Good, beautiful. Well, Ainsley and Trudy, you heard that, right? We've got a new project. Right, we're off to the races. So build on that a bit as we cross over these the great world faith traditions. Our Jewish community in Cincinnati is also long and storied. We are very pleased here at the Cincinnati Art Museum to be part of the bicentennial celebrations of Jewish history in our own city. It places Cincinnati, Ohio, in a sort of a lead position in the Midwest, and it helps us to understand better our Plum Street Temple, and to understand the history and understand the individuals who have helped to make our city great. And so we're pleased through our upcoming Henry Mosler exhibition to play our part in a much larger region-wide celebration. But it's part of an even larger story. And the Hebrew Union College has been at the center of academic and religious thought here within our community, and then in its other sites as well. And that history has helped us think about the Ancient Middle East Gallery and the Nabatean collections, which I have to admit, you mentioned our Petra exhibition, which little did we know when we closed that exhibition, it's the last that Cincinnati would see those objects for over a decade. And so here we are looking back and say, how did that time go by? And it is time again, and it gives us a chance now to think as now a 21st century installation to look. But returning to the Hebrew Union College, how do we think about the incredible influence of Cincinnati's Jewish community, the individuals as well as the community as a whole, the knit community as a whole in our city?
Well, thanks. That's a great question, and I could probably talk for about an hour about that. So Hebrew Union College, many of you know, was founded here in Cincinnati in 1875 by Isaac Mayer Wise. He did not come here and say, let me see how I can build up the Reform Jewish community here. There was no such thing as Reform Judaism when he came. He actually established the three major institutions that make up the Reform movement, and that is the Union, at that time it was called the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. Now it's called the Union for Reform Judaism. He founded that in order to support the building of a seminary which would train American trained rabbis. Most rabbis were trained in Europe at the time. And that was the Hebrew Union College. And after establishing that, as the first graduates were ordained, he founded the Central Conference of American Rabbis. These three national and actually international institutions, because we have members and we ordain people from other countries as well, all were started right here in Cincinnati. I mean, one of the things that I have noted since I've come here, and it's not just about the Jewish community, it's about everything we do here. This city punches so far up above its weight in so many ways. So, I mean, I can talk for a long time about what we did and how we impacted the history of American and world Jewry right from here in Cincinnati, where, Manischewitz boxed matzah was developed here. But look at our city. It's got its own baseball stadium, its own football stadium, its own now soccer stadium. I mean, nobody shares any of these spaces together. We're going to do everything that we can because we can do it. And that, I think, that also crosses over in so many ways into the arts. The museums, my wife and I have gone to museums all over the world. We both grew up in New York. We love New York. But this community supports art and culture in a way that is extraordinary, especially for a city of our size. It's incredible to see the devotion and the commitment of every community to the cultural institutions, whether it's the material art, whether it's performance art, whether it's cultural activities like literary clubs. I'm just completely taken by what this city and what this community does. And yes, the Jewish community here, as I think the entire city, is a very philanthropically driven city. But the Jewish community has been at the forefront of developing and investing in the arts. and culture. And we're glad to do that in collaboration with other institutions, and to share those resources and to create those experiences for people.
And thank you. And as I participate in development here at the museum, every good museum director does, and I can tell you, you're exactly right. So we are very blessed here at the museum, and many leading members of the Jewish community are very generous to this art museum. And so we are grateful, and we feel we are joined in many ways. So Dr. Ferme, let me turn for just a moment and talk about your background, and then how that connects to the work that we're all discussing as well, which is that you identify, and you said this to me in a conversation also over lunch one day, identify as a humanist by training. And there are still great humanists. Right? And you have an incredible publishing record. That crosses many different areas. And before we delve too deeply into it, it's probably a much longer conversation. That your academic credentials are absolutely sort of the envy of most, and certainly admired by all. And your experience with arts and humanities integrates tightly with your studies. So talk about that for a moment, your own area of study, and then link that to me to how that leads you to be a dean and a provost.
Okay, so that's a huge question that I don't even know how to tackle at this point. But so let's get back to the humanist. I think one of the as I was reflecting on that question, even just coming here today, I was thinking I was blessed in some ways to have a family and parents that really valued that kind of background. I remember being a kid, I'm one of 9 kids, piled in a Volkswagen minibus going across Europe with my mom carrying us all in tow into churches and museums. And you might imagine as a 7 or 8 years old, you're like, really, another museum? But it kind of creates a background for you. And so for me, that has always stayed with me. Those who know me a little bit know also that as an undergrad, my 2 degrees were biology and religious studies, which you can conjure that combination in whatever ways you want. But I came back, right, to what was my passion, what really did I like about knowledge and learning, and it had to be really in many ways the conjoining of different expression of what it means to be a human being. And in that sense, I'm a humanist in the large sense. It's not just about art, it's not just about literature, it's not just about music, it's actually how you bring these together with sort of the cultural expression of people. Even in my research, what really was my focus always is how our artistic expressions, the way into understanding cultures and what cultures were trying to do in different periods. So again, that's really the interface of humanism for me. Now, when I think about how that leads me to, led me to become a dean and to become a provost is an attention to those aspects of our humanity and our being that we all share. And so it's making sure that when I make decisions based on not only what is the you've heard a lot about budgets. I came in and I had an $8-9 million budget deficit. Our friends in classics know how fun that period was. I must say that by the way, the college is practically out of that, the College of Arts and Science, because people actually collaborated, which I think is again. I heard you say earlier, the listening is really important for me, is listening to the people that make our communities and listening to what the needs of those communities are. So coming back to, I think, one of the things that you had mentioned is how do we collaborate? How do we work together? And to me, that's at the basic value of a humanistic culture is actually understanding other people, is trying to understand other cultures. And so even in the process of collaborating, what are our needs? What are the needs that we're expressing as communities that come from different backgrounds? And I have to say, when I came in the first year I was here, actually meeting Ms. Ahmad was one of the first things that I had to do, because there had been a lapse in communication between the College of Arts and Science and the Islamic community. And so recreating an atmosphere of trust, I remember those first communications and, coming to the Islamic Center and understanding what the feelings were of people was really important. And I think that is the process that leads us to the next step. I don't know that my experience of provost or dean is different from many others, but I do bring to it a sense of how do we trust and value the humanity of others so that we can, in fact, be better as a whole.
Well, it's certainly beautiful, and I think that I would maybe even extend as maybe that concept expands across time as well as across place and across history. So allow me, as I sort of reach my final question and begin to tie this together, and ask each of you to, and Rabbi Hecht, I'm going to go to you first, just a fair warning. Is that as we reach sort of a question that tries to bring some of these ideas together. Each of our individual institutions, we're sitting in an art museum. We're sitting in a place that is that claims authorship. In many cases, we have authors in the building. And so we claim the ability and the knowledge and the expertise to be able to write history. And as we begin to write that history, we find that different perspectives on the same object or on the same historical narrative or on the same even epoch of time reaches different conclusions, and that there is a new way of thinking about listening as part of writing history. And so how can multiple histories become part of teaching? How can multiple histories, and how does an art museum help with that when we have the sort of the objectivity of an object, but we have the subjectivity of the subject?
Okay, excellent. I'm glad we skipped over the question about the military. And this question, I think, is really what we were talking about earlier, especially in our keynote speech, which was our talk, which was who owns history, and the answer is that we as a society, we own that history. It should not be in the hands of collectors who hold on to objects in their home. It's a question of how we can derive meaning in our lives. And I don't think it is going to be, let me just start off by, actually, I'll just step back for a second. In my doctoral work in medieval Jewish history, my mentor said, the study of history is the asking of intelligent questions of available source material. And when you're looking at museum holdings, whether it's our archives, what we have in our library, or what we have in our museum, and what you have here in this museum, we look at objects and we ask questions about it. The exhibit, I had a chance to look at it earlier. You look at the things that come from Kirbet Tenor, and you say, why do we have multiple gods and goddesses here in this location? Why are there so many incense altars here? What does that tell us about these people? And you ask those intelligent questions, and you try to get answers that help you shape an understanding of the past. And so I don't believe that it happens in an objective way. For each historian is going to approach this from their own subjective point of view. So this is kind of a long way to get around to saying that I think that where museums and can really help in this struggle for understanding and bringing people together is to take ideas and ask those kinds of intelligent questions. I had gone a couple of years ago to a wonderful traveling exhibit on Jerusalem, and it was Jerusalem as you went through each of the different parts of the exhibit. You saw Jerusalem from a Jewish perspective, in a biblical perspective, a Jewish perspective, how Christians understood Jerusalem in time and in art, and how the Muslim community has viewed Jerusalem. And it was all in a shared space. And obviously, when you look at the art, it's somewhat different, but it's all trying to deal with the same question of what does this holy city mean to us as humans? And so we can look back into the past to gain that kind of understanding to help us shape our future. And that kind of shared cultural experience, although we come from our own subjective selves, helps us to live together as human beings. As you were saying, as a humanist, we can look at the world around us, and we can see how our friends and our other people in our society are experiencing it. I mean, I think that collaboration between institutions, that's wonderful. I think that this is an opportunity for collaboration between different communities and different approaches. Why not have an exhibit on what does redemption mean, and look at it in each faith community, and what kind of art, how does the art and the cultural creativity of Jews and Muslims and Christians, and then obviously these are three shared faith traditions, but it can be expanded beyond that as well. How did people understand these concepts through their art, and people get a chance to reflect? I'll just end with one thing. I remember back in my undergraduate days, I took a course on world religions and comparative religions, and the professor was this guy named Thomas Martland, who wrote a book, Religion as Art. And he said similarly that you see Impressionists approach art one way, realists approach art a different way, Cubists approach art in a different way, and each one of those art forms has a certain set of rules and values that the practitioners follow, but it's all art. You can put it all in a museum and you can exhibit it all together. And then he compared it to religion. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are like art forms they all have their own rules and values and behaviors and practices, yet they all are addressing similar kinds of concerns and are like artwork. We can look at them and we can appreciate each one, even if I'm an impressionist, I can look and see what a realist does. And how much more beauty and understanding could we get into our world if we could approach our world like we're walking into a museum and seeing how different cultures and different people interact.
I, of course, love that notion, and I'm fond of saying that we at the museum try and model the behaviors and lead by example and model the behaviors that we want the world to see and to emulate. We can't instruct in that way, but we certainly can show a path that can work. So I'm gonna, with your permission, I'm gonna turn to Dr. Ferme, and then Shakila, I'm gonna let you bring us home. So, if you could think, Dr. Ferme, about that question again, about sort of objects, about subjectivity, about perspective.
So, I mean, I think with regards to objects in museums and objects that we use as not instruction, but guides to knowledge, that we're trying to gain out of the object, right? I mean, I certainly subscribe to the idea that we bring our subjective selves to this appreciation, but I also think I love the notion that the keynote presented about you can't just put the object out there without giving it a context. And you can't, and the history of that context is really important, because otherwise we are in danger of saying that subjectivity will always be more important than where the object comes from, the culture that it comes from, its past and its past history. I do want to give a credit and to the presentation today, because I think this is one of the things that museums can do for us, is bring us to face situations and perspectives like the one we heard today. I always say one of the best experiences is when you go to one of these talks and you learn something, right? And I learned something today, and I think that's the really important mission that museums and their role in our society provide us, which is to give us back a little bit of the origin of those objects in our wanting to see them, want to appreciate, want to be near them. And I understand I completely understand that even today, even in the exhibit that we have prepared here, many of those objects are decontextualized from the place. But I do appreciate the fact that when we have those objects and we try to put them in a frame of where they came from, you gain a little bit of an understanding, right? I mean, a little object that we see without the context of, it could be a part of a huge construction that was done 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago somewhere else. And then you become awed, right? That's the thing, is recreate the awe of the original object, whether it is in a religious context like we just heard, or just where it comes from, part of a bigger whole, part of a I think the context counts. You have to contextualize objects so that they have a deeper meaning, and they put us in touch, and they make us, again, listen to the origin. We can reconstruct the origin ourselves. That's the subjective part. We can see, it's like when you read a book. You don't have a visual of the book, right? So, but someone else has created that reality for you. You read it, and your imagination, your fantasy creates what that picture looks like for you. The object is still there, but you have given it your spin, but that contextual presence of the object allows you also to gain a little bit of insight in whoever produced that object. And I think that's the important role that we have in these situations.
And thank you. And I like that you reminded us of the whoever, that there are hands and there are minds and a time and a place working, and reminded us also that that present day borders and boundaries aren't necessarily the borders and boundaries that we need to think about. That the that Nabatean trade routes are quite different than Transjordan, is quite different than the kingdom. And to think about that context certainly matters, and history does matter. So with that, let's sort of bring it back to where we began, and Shakila, help us with your life experience, your life of living a life of art and history and humanity and faith, and also as a business leader in our community, and help us think about how we weave all of this together, and what role does art and an art museum play?
Absolutely, and I mean, I could listen to you guys, especially this last part, for a lot longer, which you don't have time for. So, I'll go back to kind of the connection that we made in regards to the Islamic Center and the things that I shared, and I see so much of that in the Cincinnati Art Museum, in the sense that if I look at the center and the work, and especially in regards to its education and outreach, 50% of the people that come to the Islamic Center come because they have these preconceived notions about Islam. They've heard all kinds of things. They want to know what those Muslims are doing in that building off of I-75. And there's just a lot of questions. And so there's knowledge to be shared and dispersed. So there's that element. And then the other half, they admire this gold dome and the beauty of it, and they're in awe and curious about what's inside and what they can experience. And then the third element would be, how can I connect with the people that go there? Are they my neighbors? Are they like me? How different are they? And so I think all three of those elements are critical. You know, we have beautiful tapestries and carpets and marble mosaics that come from Afghanistan to Iran to Syria to Jordan, and yet there's so much knowledge, so much history, so much culture for us to learn, because Islam is not a monolith. Art is not a monolith. What is it that I can take that would allow me to connect with my history, my culture, you know, civilizations that I'm really fascinated by? And then the last of those is, it's about human connection. I have not learned anything unless I've connected with people on a personal level about whatever I've read, whatever I've experienced, whatever it is that I, you know, seek to touch. And so it's really important that we allow people, and that the Islamic Center has done its best to, yes, provide a place of worship for people who are adherents. And, you know, this is a home in so many ways. It's my second home, my family's second home. But yet, it also has to be a place that allows people to learn, to experience, and to connect. And so I think that's really, and I see that, Cameron. I mean, I see that in the last few years that we've kind of begun to work together with Ainsley, the presentation today. I think we are embarking a new era where we allow people to do all of those things, not in the traditional sense, but in the sense of where they are and who they are and how it is that we can help them grow in all of those areas.
And I hear that loud and clear, that where they are and who they are and where we are and who we are, and making those connections. So with that, I'm going to close my binder. Well, thank you each for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow.